Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation and National Chair of the South African Communist Party, Dr. Blade Nzimande, joins us via Zoom to share his memories. Dr. Nzimande, thank you so much for your time this evening, and condolences extended to you too. Now, your reflections on Pravin Gordhan, a man that you enjoyed a relationship with since the 1980s. How do you reflect back on some of those memories?
Thank you very much, Masa, and good evening to your viewers and listeners. Let me start by expressing my own condolences, to the family of Comrade PG as we knew him, and also his close comrades. Of course, as you say, I've known Comrade PG from the late 1980s in the UDF, and at the height, I remember that we were faced with violence in KwaZulu-Natal, which was ravaging communities, killing our own comrades and so on. Violence, in fact, which was waged by the apartheid regime together with its surrogates in KZN. I must say that Comrade PG is part of a special generation, by the way, which emerged in the student formations in the late 60s and then as activists in the 70s. After the Rivonia arrest, which the apartheid regime had hoped that had killed the struggle in South Africa. So they're a very special generation that resuscitated the struggle against apartheid, in the early 70s. Comrade PG, I remember him, was a very sleek underground operator for the movement. And also he was an incredible analyst, very strategic thinker, yet had an amazing attention to detail, which is something that made him, by the way, to build SARS, the revenue service, to be what it would be. Also, what I remember about Comrade Pravin is that he was very brave, and also with a tinge of stubbornness, by the way, when faced with his enemies and detractors. He just would not pull back when it comes to defending the principles that he actually believed in. I also worked with Comrade Pravin in a period, by the way, unfortunate, that is South Africa, we are not reflecting much upon. The CODESA period, the early negotiations between 1991 and 1994, where we were serving with him at CODESA, and I had the privilege of together working with him. I was representative of the Communist Party in those negotiations. He also was very central in the Constitutional Assembly, the drafting of the Constitution, which at the time was led by the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa. But Comrade Pravin also has been very crucial in the post-apartheid period. So the revenue service, as I have said, he built it into a worldwide respected machinery. Also as Minister of Finance, though I was not Minister of Science and Technology at the time, but around 2014, 2015, I remember very well, he increased the budget for science and innovation in a manner that it had never been increased before. And even now, it has never been increased by that to support, amongst others, the square kilometer array. But that actually increased the budget of our department in a way that actually has laid a very strong basis for South Africa to be respected now in terms of science. But also, I wouldn't really be talking about Comrade Pravin if I don't say this. He stood firmly against state capture. I remember very well serving under former President Zuma's cabinet. The second term of that presidency was not an easy one, because we could see that lots of things were going wrong. We ended up, both of us, being kicked out of cabinet, by the way, in the same year, 2017, because we were actually challenging some of the things that were actually happening, that our country was being sold for nothing to foreign nationals like the Guptas that we never knew, and so on. And Comrade Pravin, I will remember him for his stance against state capture. And if there is any way that we can actually honor him, is actually to continue the fight against state capture, whoever is responsible for that state capture, because we must also say this, and Comrade Pravin understood this, it's not only those from within our ranks as the ANC and the Alliance that must take responsibility. Also what I would call vulture capitalists who are working with some of those from our own ranks to actually take the state to the cleaners. That we must fight whoever is responsible for state capture in the future. That we must actually honor. That's where also his tinge of stubbornness actually came out. I must also say, by the way, I had the honor to work with Comrade Pravin in an interministerial committee set up by the president to deal with the complexities that were facing the SAA. In particular, I worked with Comrade Pravin in that interministerial committee. We're both actually engaged and we were both committed in trying to save the national airline. I hear some people saying, yeah, Comrade Pravin, messed up SAA, but his objective, working together with some of us, Minister Ngesi was part of that, appointed by the president, Minister Mbalula at the time, we were trying to save the national airline because as South Africa, we believed very strongly, and also it was the resolution of the ANC that we must save the national airline. We did the best that we could do working with Comrade Pravin.
Dr. Nzimande, also on that too, there has been mixed reaction about his time when he was the Minister of Public Enterprises. But I want to touch on the history that you spoke of as well, just his commitment and his role to the liberation movement when you speak of the era of the CODESA talks as well and his contributions there too. It was earlier on this channel, my colleague Iman Rapeti was in the home of his daughter, Priyasha Gordhan, and she was just speaking about how her father remained an activist till the very, very end, saying that, while he was ill, he had already been hospitalized, but he had stayed up with his family till about 11:30 on Friday night, working on his speech because the NIC had a commemoration ceremony on Sunday, and he was adamant that he still, of course, wanted to speak and have his voice heard there too. And that kind of speaks testament to his role as an activist.
He was very determined. He was an activist throughout his whole life. From his days in the 1960s at the University of Durban, Westville, which started, by the way, I think it was called Island University and so on, right throughout his whole life. As a matter of fact, one thing that I'm also very sad about, knowing the family, is that it's very sad that someone like him, when he decided to retire, he didn't even have a year with his family, which is very sad. One wishes that someone like him could have retired and spent a number of years just enjoying normal family life, which actually he never had because he was totally dedicated to the liberation of our country and the reconstruction of our country. That's why also I must just condemn as totally un-African and lack of Ubuntu these forces who are attacking him left, right, and center. Most of them, we know them, by the way. They were part of the elements of stealing money through state capture in the country. That's why they are actually attacking. Those who know Comrade Pravin and his contribution, both before 1994 and after 1994, no one doesn't have a mistake. We all have our own weaknesses and mistakes, but we can't falter him on his commitment to build a better South Africa for everyone.
I also want to touch on that period. You're mentioning that second term, the second Zuma term, and how difficult it was during that time as well. You got axed during that time. He also got axed as finance minister too, then had to be sent back. In that interview as well, his daughter said around about 2016, 2017, that's when he started showing ill health. And that was round about the time when he was also accused of being a spy, when he was axed as the minister as well. And there was a lot that was actually going on during that time. And one of the things she said was he remained resolute, though. He felt like he got to a point where it's enough, but never to quit.
Yes, in fact, the main reason why Comrade Pravin was targeted after 1994, in particular when he was in cabinet, is also because of his stance against state capture. I mean, we challenged as the SACP in an alliance meeting former President Zuma when he said, I'm firing him because my intelligence has actually told me this or that. There was no such intelligence. Unfortunately, Comrade Zuma is still continuing, even in his own party now, saying the intelligence says this, the intelligence said that. The reason why the action was being taken against Comrade Pravin is because he was fighting against state capture. And I want to say, by the way, post-1994, There is no more noble a cause than the fight to ensure that the resources of our country are not being stolen. Worse, like what was happening, in fact, what was happening, I would like to put it bluntly, in the state capture period is treason. It's treasonable, you know? That's how serious and how bad it was. That is why all these people who are taking Comrade Pravin, even those, I think they also manufactured the fact that he has passed away even before, are all those who were beneficiaries of this criminality that actually placed our country in a very, very dangerous situation. But he stood firm. As I said, he had a streak of stubbornness, which I admired, actually, against his enemies and against his detractors, and said, I am not going. Unfortunately, I wasn't aware at that time, 2016, 2017, a very difficult period, that he wasn't well. He only shared with me on the side in the last cabinet meeting as we were leaving, you know, and I was saying, Comrade PG, what are you going to be doing now that you are retiring? He says, hey, Comrade Blade, I'm actually not well. I need to tell you that. He never told me the details. But it was the first time I had him like that and looking a bit vulnerable, because he never allowed himself to be vulnerable, even at the height of torture and being abused by the apartheid regime. He said that. That's one of the last things that I can remember, actually, that he said to me as we were leaving the last cabinet meeting. I said, no, there isn't much that I'm going to do because I'm not well. Yeah. He confided to me on that without telling me the details. And I think really Comrade Pravin has contributed enormously to this country. And some of these elements who are attacking him did nothing for the country except to steal from it. That is why we are calling on South Africans to say, no matter what people thought Comrade Pravin's weaknesses were, we must honor him for the contribution that he made to build a new South Africa and actually building some of the institutions of a democratic South Africa.
Well, Dr. Nzimande, just to also alleviate you there, the family did say that, you know, he was a deeply private man, so he hadn't actually shared from earlier on at that period that he actually was facing some sort of an illness of sort. But, you know, to your point as well, the concern that they had, they said, you know, now that he's retired, they were hoping that they were going to get more time with him. In fact, the daughter said, they feel robbed. They feel that their time with him has been robbed because this was their time, finally, to be with him.
Must I agree? That's what is said, as I've said personally to me, you know, that Comrade Pravin couldn't even finish a year retired with his family, something that he has never had in his life. By the way, he died of cancer. I do want to say that as Minister of Science, I've said to my department, let's prioritize investment into research on cancer, because it has now become a pandemic and it's costing us. And I'm also going to do this in honor of Comrade Pravin and in honor of people like Comrade Joslow, who also died of blood cancer, and say that in their memory, let's try and find a solution, either in terms of vaccines against particular types of cancers, or therapeutics that are actually going to be able to sort out this issue of cancer, because it is now a pandemic. That's one of the things I've committed myself as Minister of Science going forward, whilst I'm still acting in this particular role that I am in. And with that, you know, we want to say, Comrade Pravin, we are very proud of you, and say to the family, just ignore the naysayers, because Comrade Pravin made a huge contribution to the liberation and reconstruction of our country.
Dr. Nzimande, thank you so much for sharing those memories and your comments and reflections as well.